So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for your patience as I got the slides. I did everything else except forgot to put the slides up. I'd like to start this morning by doing acknowledgement to country. So Magical Learning and myself would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country throughout Australia and their continuing connection to land, culture and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present. So welcome today. As I said, my name is Danette Fenton-Menzies. I am the Director of Learning at Magical Learning. And today we're going to talk about life-work balance, particularly through disruption and post-disruption. So some of the things we're going to cover in this 45-minute webinar are: what is that new version of work-life or life-work balance going to look like for all of us? And what are the costs if we don't actually work that out? And finally, I've got 4 tools and techniques that I'd love to share with you to help you improve your work or life work balance. Now, I'm actually really interested, and I'm going to put a slide up just with a quote, but I actually would love to know in a second what you are hoping to get out of today's webinar. So feel free in the chat box, which I should have explained, is if you squiggle your mouse, you'll find a toolbar which has 3 dots. And on that 3 dots, if you click it down, it has a chat function. So feel free, and I'll just use it just to sort of light it up on your screen for you. And there's the question we were talking about. And put your thing to all panelists and attendees. So in the chat box, I've shared good morning and welcome to everyone. Now, what I'd love for you to share is really what do you think we mean by the whole term life work or work life balance? I'd love for you to share with me what are the things you perceive that to be. And also I'm interested, what are the things or the challenges you're experiencing at the moment with all of this disruption? Because I know some people have kids at home, partners at home, they're working from home and trying to balance all of that, which is added to the complication of life-work balance because they're now in the same place for a lot of people as well. Now, I'm interested, anyone experiencing some of those challenges at the moment? Feel free to put yes in the chat box. And good morning, I see Jamie's on there. Good morning, Jamie. Jamie's coming in from Hong Kong, so it's quite early her time. Welcome. All right, okay. So, yeah, it is something I think for all of us that is really important. And a question which I haven't put on a slide, but one thing that I think for all of us we should be starting to think about is, what does a good life actually look like for you? And the same for me. Because when you think about it, we can be being busy, and I see this a lot where people are super stressed at the moment. They're working from home, they've got family at home, they're trying to juggle perhaps kids doing homeschooling, as well as partner working, as well as doing everything else. And because of that stress, they're missing things that are really important in their life. So I think it helps for us to become aware of what is that good life? What does it look like for you? And then how do you create that life given the circumstances we're in at the moment? Thank you, Allegra. Having a balance in your life so you prioritise both work and life commitments. Absolutely. And, I remember many years ago reading a quote which talked about, on your deathbed, you're not going to think about the extra time you spent on work. And if we don't get this balance right, we have regrets around missing those important parts of our life. So anyway, thank you for participating, and feel free to continue to share questions, comments as we go. So in terms of work-life balance, or life-work balance as I like to talk about it, it really is about getting that harmony in the different parts of your life. Now, it doesn't mean every day is going to be perfect, because every day is not going to be perfect. It does, however, mean that, if you look at a week of your life and you go, oh, I was so out of harmony this week, it's okay, what little things can you change for next week to get more of that harmony back? And because everything is, for a lot of people, occurring at home at the moment, and a lot of people are still not necessarily able to travel very much, it's how do I get that peace or that sense of harmony during this time? And one of the things that's really important is identifying what are the boundaries that perhaps I need to make a bit stronger, and are there boundaries I need to flex a little bit more on? Because at the end of the day, it's our boundaries that actually give us that harmony. So if you say yes to everything, eventually you'll burn out because you can't do everything. And in fact, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who was talking about that sense of unease comes when we book too many things back to back, trying to achieve so many things during a day, when in fact we should actually be creating more space during our day. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on in one of the tools that we talk about. Now, what can happen to us if we don't get this right? Well, the first thing is, if we really don't get it right, we're actually going to miss what is truly important to us. Again, it is really easy to get distracted, busy being busy. For example, these things, phones, computers, etc., have a sense of urgency around them. So if they ring or they blip, we tend to go, oh, look at that. Versus we might be sitting down to have a conversation with a loved one where we've just got distracted from the important conversation by something that blipped or rang, which is not necessarily as important. So learning to put those boundaries in place is really important, because otherwise busy is going to be mistaken for important. One of the things I see is that people who don't get this balance right invariably have regret, often about their relationships. So the work gets put before their relationships, and before too long, they don't have those relationships, or those relationships are quite badly fractured, which is not a good outcome. Because what we know is most important in our life is that connection. That keeps us safe. It keeps us healthy from so many different aspects. Without that, the work can't love you back. It really is about the connections that we have. Some of the other things, you don't necessarily get to show your true potential, because if urgency is riding your life or driving your life, then the things that you're really good at you may push to one side because they're not urgent. So instead of focusing on the important, we tend to focus on that urgency. One I see a lot is stress and burnout. People just get overwhelmed by what's going on in their life, and particularly at the moment. I read an article the other day and was talking about Zoom burnout. So it was saying, if you've got more than 3 meetings a day, you're probably going to find that actually zaps you of energy, because we're not used to talking to each other virtually and for extended periods of time. So that can lead to burnout. So again, it's creating that space in our life so that it doesn't cost us. Now, what other costs does not managing our life-work balance cost us? So interested in the chat box, any things that you have noticed maybe about yourself or others where that balance hasn't quite been right? And I'll sort of add one while we're talking. Your true potential requires you to be healthy and energetic. And when we don't get that life-work balance, often what we do is strip away the things that are really important for our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health in order to serve others. And so I notice with a lot of people, myself included, when I don't get this right, is that my resilience drops. And I'll know that, and we all know it, because our resilience, when it drops, everyone around us starts to annoy us. Thank you, Allegra. Being flustered trying to organise everything if the balance is off. Absolutely. So what we notice is those stress levels tend to increase where we don't get this right. And it's a pretty good indicator, time to slow down a bit. Now, that doesn't mean we will be less effective. It generally means we'll be more effective. And I'll cover that in a second. So again, I love quotes. It's just who I am. Balance is not better time management, but better boundary management. Balance means making choices and enjoying those choices. And that's by Betsy Jacobson. What a great quote, because it is so true. Really, it's about those good boundaries in order to have a great life-work balance. So let's look at the first tool. And this tool I like to call acceptance. What that means is don't resist what is. So what is in your life is in your life. Don't try and resist it, because the moment we resist what is, we put energy into saying, well, that shouldn't be like that, or I don't want that to be like that. Instead, look at your life, start to become more aware of your life and think about, okay, are there things that I need to change in my life in order that I get that sense of harmony more than I do, that I don't, sorry. So remember that when we resist anything, we burn energy needlessly. So the first thing I would say is, once you become aware of what's going on, is look at your life and actually identify what is important versus urgent. So for me, for example, my family are super, super important. However, I know that if I'm going to serve my family, I need to look after myself first. So I put myself first, my family and loved ones next, and then work comes third. And so it allows me to make decisions, and I don't always get it right, but when I don't, I have a way of refreshing that and changing that. But it allows me to focus really on what is important versus being driven by urgency. And when I'm driven by urgency, as Allegra says, you start to feel more flustered. I start to feel more stressed. And I know that I'm getting out of that balance and more into unbalance in certainly one or more areas of my life. So first of all is knowing what is important. And I'd absolutely recommend to everyone that you spend some time thinking about what is truly important in your life. And then start to think about, okay, where are my boundaries around those areas of importance not as good as they should be? So that means that in some areas I need to start learning to say no, or no, not right now. And in other areas, it really is making myself less available for some things in order to make myself more available for other things. And those other things are always going to be higher in the importance rating. So, part of helping us to do that, one of the things I do every weekend with my husband is we rate our week. So on a scale of 1 being it was a horrid week, through to 10 being it was an awesome week, what was our score out of 10? And the next thing we do is we list the positives for the week. So the things that made us feel good, made us know that we're on track with those important things. And we also put the negatives. So the things that took us away from what was important. And generally it's because something has come up and we've reacted to that urgency rather than taking it back to what is important. Once you can become aware of those boundaries that perhaps need to be a little bit more rigid and some that need to flex, it's really then thinking about, how do I say no, or how do I push back a little bit in terms of how quickly I need to respond to things. And it's also, how do I get that balance back in life? For example, a lot of people, when we used to go to the office, and I know some still do, but a lot of people don't. When we used to go to the office, you would get dressed up. And then when you would come home, you would change your clothes. And that would be a way of saying, okay, I'm home now. There's a boundary between work and home. We used to talk in our workshops around a concept called the third space. And the third space is really that space between work and home. And so we would say to people, if you're commuting home, pick a traffic light or pick a spot where you decide to leave work there and then concentrate on, what's my intention when I show up at home? And so while you might be working from home now, it might be just changing your clothes and then just setting that intention about, okay, now is family time. It could be, if you've got your own office at home, closing that door to that room, and that's the end of the work day. Certainly things such as, and again, I'm going to pull up my phone, things such as your phone, turning them off at the end of the day and allowing yourself to have that quiet time with your family. Certainly they shouldn't be on when you're eating a meal together, because that's a really lovely time to connect. The other thing I'd say around this is, if you're not sure where your life's at the moment, there's a fabulous tool called the Wheel of Life. Google Wheel of Life, and I'll just put it in the chat box for a second so you can see. Oops, went too far there. Did something there. And what it does is it looks at the different aspects in your life. For example, your self-care, your home environment, your friends and loved ones, things such as your career, the money you earn, your loved ones, obviously things like your spiritual health, fun, etc. And what it does is it asks you, again, to rank a little bit like we rank our week, from 1 being not getting much attention through to 10 getting lots of attention. The lovely thing I like about the Wheel of Life is that it really does show you what areas of your life are perhaps a little bit out of balance. Again, once you're aware, you can start to make changes in how you ensure that you focus some more time on those areas that are important to you that are missing out. Some of the other things I just wanted to share in terms of acceptance. We know that the higher emotions such as gratitude, kindness, love, compassion give us energy, versus notice when fear starts to come into your life. So you might be comparing your life to someone else. It's your life. Don't compare it to someone else. We might look at someone else who perhaps is working from home and thinking, well, it's not fair. They seem to be doing more work than us or me. Again, don't do that comparison, because what we know is those low fear energy emotions drain us. We spend lots of time up here in our head versus being present, which is where acceptance sits. Because when I'm present, I accept what is in front of me. Now, we know that you are in charge of you. So one of the things to think about is, okay, if I'm in charge of me, how do I slow down and create the life that I really want? So by being present, you'll actually find that you have more time rather than less time. We lose time when we're up here, either thinking forward or thinking backwards, because our mind starts to chatter and we start to give energy to something that's not actually happening at the moment. Whether it's happening in the future, maybe it will, or if it's already happened, it's happened, let it go. So give yourself time to think and just be present. Now, any questions as we go, feel free to put in the chat box. The second thing that I think is a really good tool to help us achieve more life-work balance is that ability to focus on our well-being. Because if we don't fuel ourselves, we can't serve ourselves, let alone anyone else. Now, in the chat box, I'd love for you to share with me if you're good at asking for help. So if you are, yes. If you're not so good, no. In the chat box, I'd love for you to share. And while you do that, I'm just going to have a drink of water. All right. Not everyone is so good at asking for help. Some people are, but a lot of people aren't. One of the things that will absolutely help our well-being is developing that ability to ask for help. We can't all do it by ourselves. We really do need to come together and support each other. So don't be afraid to ask for help. When we look after ourselves first, we literally are fueling ourselves. So some of the things that we can do, and it is like putting the oxygen mask on, which they advise when you're flying. If the oxygen mask drops down, put it on yourself first and then give it to others. When we don't do that, it is literally like this. It drops down, and this is our self-care. And instead of looking after ourselves first, we go, we start sharing with lots of other people, and eventually our body kicks back and says, no, enough, you've been too generous with everyone else. However, you've forgotten yourself. And when we forget ourselves, our body starts to get tired. It also starts to get annoyed by other people around us. And a classic phrase I hear is, everybody is pissing me off. And at that stage, I know that person's been really, really generous with everyone else and forgotten about themselves. So take that time to look after yourself first. if you can, first thing in the morning is generally the best time, because then you have less excuses and less distractions. Some things you can do is journal, meditate, take time to exercise, fuel your body using good food. Make sure that you are hydrated, and by hydration, good water. Water is the thing that really helps our body feel good. It's funny, I drink lots of water. I love water. In fact, it's my favorite drink. And I don't remember the last time, for example, I had a headache, because I just am beautifully hydrated all the time. And I talk a lot, obviously, as a facilitator. And so I make sure extra special that I take lots and lots of water. Some other things, sleep. It is so important for a variety of reasons, which I'll touch on the last tool. Spend time reading. Most important, spend time connecting. If you can't connect face to face, which a lot of us can't at the moment, taking that time to connect via video as much as possible, because that's the second best way of communicating. And in fact, Allegra and I usually once every day or two spend an hour just watching a TV series that we're watching at the moment, Outlander, together, and just sharing that beautiful time together. I know that at the end of each of those sessions, I come away with a lot more energy, and I am more productive afterwards than if I don't take that time to connect. Some of the other things, baths or showers, getting out in nature, spending time with animals is really lovely as well, and spending time just being creative. All of those things fuel us. And take that time, and one thing I'd absolutely say is make sure you make time to connect first with yourself, and that's why journaling, meditation, etc. are really good, and then connecting with your loved ones. Another ritual we have in our family at the moment is on Saturday nights we have Zoom party time, so we play different games with the whole of our family, and it's just a beautiful way to connect. On Sundays, we connect with our parents and our kids, and my brother who lives in the States come on, and we all get together and just chat for half an hour about our weeks. Again, just a beautiful way of maintaining that wellness by hanging out together. Some other things I love to do, we live in the middle of nowhere, literally, so between Gundagai and Cootamundra for people who live in New South Wales. And so my husband and I will often either watch the sun come up, and if we can, we will also watch the sun go down. We have a beautiful table and chairs in the eastern corner of our property, and we just sit there and watch Mother Nature do her amazing display. It's such a beautiful way to start the day and also end the day. It makes us very calm and centered. And one of the other things my husband and I do, given we work together and have done for 21 years, and we live together and we are isolated our farm at the moment, is we still pick a night a week and we have a date night. And that's a beautiful way just of connecting and not talking about work. So that's the second tool. The third tool is to remove distractions. You're not going to get more time back. However, if you remove distractions, you'll actually make better use of your time. So some simple things you can do to become more alert and more focused, because really getting rid of distractions gives us more focus, is when we have more focus, we achieve more in less time. And it also drains less energy. So if you like essential oils, you could have either a citrus essential oil, a peppermint essential oil, or a rosemary essential oil in your workspace to wake you up. You can also have a high energy playlist that again says to your brain, okay, it's time to start work. Again, coming back to that, make sure you know what's important. So remove those distractions that impact on your family time, your important time, your self-care time. Make sure you, as much as possible, do about 3 as a maximum for Zoom calls a day. Alternate, if you have to have more than that, alternate by using the phone, just to get some relief from having to look at the camera so much. The other thing is actually examine the meetings that you have every day. I read a lovely tip on Thrive Global last week, which was for the next week or two in your calendar, once you've done a meeting, color code it. So green, it was amazing, got a lot out of it. Amber was okay, wasn't entirely useful. And red, really, I don't understand why I was there. And just do that for every meeting you attend. And then after the end of the fortnight, have a look at that colour coding. And if you've done that meeting, say twice, then, and it's red both times, maybe you need to question why you're actually attending it. By doing that, you're getting back some time if you can get out of that meeting. The other thing is, I love the concept of stop doing list. So notice the stuff you do that really doesn't give you energy, that tends to distract you from what you're really good at. For example, I'm two types of accountants, so I'm both chartered and CPA. However, I do no accounting in my business because that's not where I value add. So if you know where you value add, you can then say no to stuff that doesn't really utilize the skill set that you bring to your organization. So think about what those areas are, and usually they're 3 or 4 areas that you're really good at, that you enjoy, that you get energy from, and where you should focus most of your time, about 90% of your time. The other things then look at, is this something that we should outsource? Is it something that someone else in the organization actually really enjoys, and maybe I could swap with them and do something that they don't like doing that I enjoy doing? And then there's stuff we should just absolutely stop doing. And the more we do that, the more we get our time back. Distractions actually drain your energy. For example, we know that every time you switch tasks, we're not born to multitask. We actually drain the energy in our brain every time we give our attention to new things. You are much better to try something like the Pomodoro technique, where you do something for 25 minutes and then have a 5-minute break, and literally set an alarm for 25 minutes, do the task, and then have that 5-minute break. And we're going to talk about breaks in a second, because that's where the actual work is done. So strip away what isn't essential and what you don't value add. Remove those distractions from your life in order to buy back what is so important in your time, the time for what is really important. Now, the last tool that I'd love to talk about is breaks. And I want to share some interesting studies around breaks. So the University of California did a study, and in it they discovered that downtime is where the neurons in our brain make their way from the gateway of our memory into the rest of the brain, which is where our long-term memories are stored. What we know is that when people don't take breaks, and by breaks, it could be just getting up and having a cup of tea or a glass of water, doing a little bit of stretching, exercise. It could be taking holidays, and it certainly is taking time off on weekends, at night, etc. Where we don't do this, we end up with poorer memory, mental fog, and fatigue. So if you actually want to be more effective, here's the way to do it. It's actually to increase the amount of breaks you have. Now, Harvard Business Review and the Energy Project published an article back in 2007 in the Harvard Business Review. And what they found was the following benefits by taking regular breaks during the day. Now, in this particular study, people were working for 90 minutes and then taking a 20-minute break. Equally, you could be doing 45 minutes with a 10-minute break, or try the Pomodoro technique, 25 minutes and then a 5-minute break. The benefits of taking those breaks were the following, and everyone will want these. Their focus increased by 30%. Their sense of and their actual level of health and well-being increased by 46%. How amazing is that? And even more importantly, their sense or their creativity improved by 48%. Now, during the disruption we're going through, they're the types of skills we actually want to get, aren't they? We want to have more focus. We want to have better health and well-being. We want to be more creative. So by taking regular breaks throughout the day, you actually improve your productivity, not decrease it. People who don't take breaks, this is what they think they're doing. They think their productivity throughout the day is doing this, but in fact what it's doing is it goes hard for a little while, but then it declines. We now know, and the gentleman who started the Energy Project spent a lot of time studying elite athletes, and what he discovered was those that were at the best in their fields went really hard and then took breaks, and in that break their bodies, their minds recovered so they could push hard again and then have breaks. So make sure that you do have those regular breaks. The other thing is we know that our ability to concentrate naturally is somewhere between 10 to 40 minutes. So beyond 40, 45 minutes, you're generally pushing yourself unless you're in the flow. And the flow means you're relaxed and you're doing something that, you know, you're really good at. You can't get there when you're stressed and overwhelmed. And you're stressed and you're overwhelmed when you don't take regular breaks. So if you want to improve your breaks, think about having perhaps, you know, just getting up and moving away from your work area at home or at work. At the end of the day, have a relaxation playlist. So it's different to the one you use during the day to help you focus. The other thing are, if you're into essential oils, things such as lavender, rose, lang lang are really good scents to help our brain go, oh, okay, now it's time to calm down. Again, you could do beautiful things such as go for a walk at the end of the day, close the door, making sure, however, during that day that you absolutely take the time to rest up. If you are doing things such as, my husband talks about al desco for lunch, meaning you're eating your lunch at your desk, that's not going to really give you much of a break because you've probably got your screen on. If at all possible, just get up and move somewhere else. Sit down. If at all possible, look out into nature. Or if you do have your screen on, put it on something that is more like nature. So you could Google nature meditation and just watch perhaps a stream going through a forest or a picture of the ocean crashing, the waves crashing on the shore. All of this, again, just helps us to delineate between work and what we're doing, which is work life, which we want the life bit, don't we? Another really good break to factor into your week, and you only need to do it once a week, is pick a time in your calendar and create a 30-minute slot. And that slot is where you turn off all of your devices and you use that time to daydream better ways to move forward. So moving forward with your family and your loved ones, and also more innovative ways of working. Because again, in that time, if we do it regularly, our brain will get used to it and we will come up with ways of getting back time that has been perhaps wasted on things that aren't as important as us spending time thinking about how we can value add more in our life, how we can create a better life. Now, that tip I got off Jim Quick. He's written a really interesting book that I'm about a quarter of the way through at the moment called Limitless. And it has some really amazing science around how we need to get better at using this by learning how to learn better. So in those breaks, we can take time to learn as well. Now, there's some simple tips, and I want to make sure that I don't go over time. So let me just check the time. Oh, we've still got a little bit of time. So I'm curious, any questions you have about how we get that balance back? So just to recap what I've given so far, it really is accepting what is, becoming aware of what is important, and then pushing back on things that take us away from that importance. Spending time on our well-being, firstly to look after ourselves so we can look after loved ones, and then, you know, work, etc. And making sure that we get rid of those disruptions, and finally taking breaks. So there's some simple ways to give us more balance in a life that for the next little while, for many of us, we are going to be working from home, also living at home clearly, and juggling all of the other aspects of our life, potentially in just one environment. So you can't get back more time. You can't necessarily create other barriers or boundaries in your life. So how is it that you create that beauty around getting a better life work balance? Become aware of what's important for you and making sure that you then put those boundaries around that. I love Stephen Covey. He wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in one of his other books, First Thing First, he created a time quadrant model, which is fabulous for being able to identify what's important versus what's urgent. And the time quadrant model, which I'll just put in here, time quadrant. Again, I'd encourage you to Google it, by Stephen Covey. Really spending 5-10 minutes looking at quadrant 1 is stuff that's urgent and important. which obviously is high stressful. Quadrant 2 is important but not yet urgent, and that's the quadrant we need to spend more time in. It's identifying what's important and then not making it stressful, actually creating space in our life to exercise, to connect with loved ones. If you're homeschooling, to be able to sit with your child or children and help them understand what they need to understand, ask them good questions before they go off and do their schoolwork, versus being what most people are in, which is quadrant 3, which is stuff that is urgent but not important, and it overrides importance because it rings or it blips or it comes up and talks to us and takes us away from what is truly important. Thank you, Jamie. Absolutely agree with the 4 tools. Thank you so much. So Stephen Covey, I like this quote: most of us spend too much time on what is urgent and not enough time on what is important. And really, a life where we don't examine our life means we miss what, at the end of the day, is going to cause us regret if we don't spend that time on what is truly important. So, question for you now: what are you going to work on in terms of life-work balance moving forward? Really love to know 1 or 2 actions you're going to take just to get that balance a little bit better. And one thing I've done and I'm going to continue to do is make sure I take breaks before, between meetings, so I don't do back to back. Thank you. Allegra said the same. Scheduling breaks more rigidly. Absolutely. And the funny thing is, so currently the way we measure productivity is how many hours a person is working. That's actually not how we are productive. There are days where you won't be productive even though you're at work all day. There'll be other days where you might go out and do something fun before work. You come in, your brain's on fire, and then all of a sudden you've achieved all these things that took ages. I know that my best work time is somewhere between 4 and 8:30 a.m. I love the early morning, and that's where I develop most of the programs that I need to develop for our company. So one other thing is to think about what's your body clock and how do you work with that to make sure you fuel yourself first so that you can serve not only yourself but others afterwards. So those breaks, I love that, Allegra. Notice when your body is really alert, that's the time to focus on those important tasks, which include work and also include that beautiful time with loved ones. Now, as always, we also have a number of helpful resources. So there's a couple of talks. There's also an article from Harvard about what will work-life balance look like after the pandemic. So I've shared that particular one with you. 2 TED Talks, and there's some podcasts you can listen to. Another book which I'd forgotten about, which I'm just going to share with you, and it's a couple of years old now, but it is Thrive by Arianna Huffington. Again, she spent a lot of time studying what makes people be able to thrive. So that's a good one also to be able to think about, how do we create that life-work balance? Because it's no use being the richest person in the graveyard, as my coach used to say to me. Really doesn't help. Oh, I love that. Mark said on Facebook, more me time, find the time to give that time for your mind and stuff. So important. Yes, I love it. Clear your mind. I love it. Beautiful. So we've covered about everything that we're going to cover. Next month, our free upskilling webinar is on growing employee engagement. That's going to happen on Wednesday, the 17th of June at 10:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time. We love to share what we know, so hopefully you found this helpful. Thank you all so much for joining us today, whether it was on the Zoom call or on Facebook Live. Really appreciate that you spent some time with us. We, this month, are concentrating on life-work balance. We will be sharing videos, infographics, a number of posts around how to get more life-work balance. So feel free to follow us on any of our social media channels, and have a magical day. Thank you all so much for joining us. Until next time, take care.